On July 15, 1982, in Seattle, Washington, USA, a group of young children were playing near the Green River when they noticed something floating in the water. Upon closer inspection, they discovered the naked body of a 16 or 18-year-old girl. Immediately terrified, the youngsters contacted the police for assistance. However, the authorities were not entirely surprised by this gruesome discovery. As USA was undergoing a period of modernization, the rising popularity of sex workers, nightclubs, and pubs meant that such incidents were becoming more common. Despite the police's efforts, they were unable to prevent such crimes from occurring. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. Prepare yourselves for a journey through one of the most enigmatic and captivating investigative cases in the annals of history, the mysterious Green River Killer. Brace yourselves for a harrowing tale. Dear viewers, this case is not for the faint of heart, as it involves graphic details of a brutal crime. If you are easily disturbed, please watch with caution. Now, let's jump into the investigation. Over the next 2 years, more than 50 sex workers would fall victim to this ruthless killer. The continuous string of murders left the American cops terrified. Interestingly, the police received assistance in locating the killer from none other than Ted Bundy, a notorious serial killer himself. At first, the cops investigated the case as a routine matter. However, on August 15, 1982, they received another call reporting the discovery of another body in the Green River. Upon arriving at the scene, they identified the victim as 31-year-old Marcia Faye Chapman. While searching for evidence, they stumbled upon another body belonging to 17-year-old Cynthia Jean Hines. The police officers were shocked by this discovery and were soon met with a third body, that of 16-year-old Opal Charmaine Mills. All three victims were found naked, similar to the previous case. The police now realized that this was no ordinary situation. They strongly suspected the involvement of a serial killer in these heinous crimes. On August 16, 1982, a special investigatory team was established under the supervision of Robert Keppel to focus solely on this case. At this point, the police had only unearthed 3 key details. First, that the victims were all sex workers. Second, that they were primarily between the ages of 16 and 18. And third, that the killer was disposing of their bodies along the Green River. Despite these limited clues, the police struggled to make significant progress in the case. Months passed without any major developments until finally in 1982, the bodies of 9 girls had been discovered in this manner. Due to the method of disposal, the media began to refer to the perpetrator as the Green River Killer. The case posed numerous challenges and obstacles for law enforcement. All of the victims were found in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult for the forensic team to utilize the DNA profiling technology available at the time. Without definitive DNA evidence, it was nearly impossible to determine if the victims had come into contact with any other potential suspects. Furthermore, the fact that they were sex workers meant that they may have had interactions with numerous unknown individuals, many of whom could have a criminal background. As a result, the suspect list for this case continued to grow, making it increasingly difficult for the police to narrow down the perpetrator. Even after a year had passed and 26 sex workers had been found dead or missing, the authorities had made no significant breakthroughs in the case. One particular victim, Mary, was an 18-year-old sex worker who was out to dinner with her boyfriend when the killer struck. Her boyfriend, also involved in the sex trade, was called away during their meal, leaving Mary vulnerable and unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. With haste, he scoured every location in sight before peering outside, only to witness Mary climbing into a different pickup truck. Immediately, he attempted to intervene, but the vehicle sped off with alarming speed. Undeterred, he took off after them. But just as he was closing in, the truck disappeared from view. Frantically, he searched the area, convinced he saw the truck in a distant vicinity. Without hesitation, he reported his suspicions to the authorities. The police arrived swiftly and, upon seeing the situation, launched an investigation into Gary Ridgway, a 34-year-old who worked as a local truck painter. It was then revealed that the pickup truck belonged to him. However, he denied knowing Mary. The police wasted no time in searching his home, determined to uncover the truth, but Mary's presence was not evidenced. Moreover, there was nothing to lead them to suspect him. As a result, he was released by the police, prompting an undercover operation to be planned. During this operation, several female officers disguised as prostitutes and dispersed to different areas were monitored, and if anyone misbehaved or attacked them, the investigation team hoped to find the killer among the suspects they identified. Clinton Clark, initially suspected of sexually assaulting 2 prostitutes at gunpoint. Further background checks revealed a history of criminal cases against him. Additionally, possession of 2 firearms led to his detainment for further questioning. However, he claimed that his actions were fueled by drugs and denied any involvement in the murders. He maintained his innocence and had a solid alibi for the time of the murders. Ultimately, he was released by the police. Next, the truck painter Gary Ridgway, also a suspect in the case, was once again brought under scrutiny during the undercover operation. This angered him, and he voluntarily offered to take a polygraph test. He requested not to be disturbed again and explained the nature of the test to the media. The polygraph test, also known as the lie detector test, measures the person's pulse and blood pressure to determine the accuracy of their statements. Upon passing the test, Ridgway was cleared of suspicion, resulting in his release by the police once again. The primary suspect held by the police was a 41-year-old taxi driver. The police deemed him to be the Green River Killer, based on his personality and activities. However, they lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him. In an attempt to arrest him, the police pinned unpaid parking tickets and traffic violations on him. If he did not commit any murders while in jail, the police were confident that he was the killer. However, murder still occurred while he was behind bars, leading to his release. By the end of 1983, 42 girls had been found dead or missing in Seattle. With no leads, the police were at a loss for what to do. Around this time, the infamous serial killer, Ted Bundy, considered the most dangerous man in America, sent a letter to Robert, the investigator in charge of the case. In the letter, he offered his help and invited Robert to meet him. Robert immediately went to meet Bundy, and what he learned was staggering. Bundy claimed that the killer's house was likely to be near where he disposed of the body. Moreover, he predicted that the killer would return to the site to have sexual relations with the corpses. In other words, Bundy suggested that the killer may be a necrophile. The police were in shock upon hearing Ted Bundy's words. As a result, surveillance in the Green River area was heightened. Despite it being 2 years since the case began, the murder rates had steadily decreased after March 1984. In fact, the killings came to a halt completely. However, this did not bring the authorities any closer to catching the killer. They pondered why the murders had suddenly stopped. Had the killer truly stopped? Or had their methods changed? Perhaps they had moved on to other states or countries. With these questions plaguing the police, they decided to make a final attempt at solving the case. They narrowed down their list of suspects and created an A+ profile with those that met certain criteria. Ted Bundy's previous mention near the Green River, and suspects with a criminal background were among those on the list. Additionally, those who appeared on the list multiple times were also included. Using the samples from the list, a DNA profile was created, but it did not match the DNA found on the victim's body. As the years passed, the case became colder and colder. It wasn't until 20 years later, in November 2001, when advanced DNA profiling methods emerged, that a breakthrough was finally made. Through retesting the DNA of the A+ suspects, a match was found with the DNA from the victim's body. It was a major breakthrough for the police 2 decades after the murder ceased. The first victims discovered by the police were Marcia, Opal, Cynthia, and Wendy, who had their DNA profile created from DNA evidence found on their bodies. Shockingly, the DNA profile was an exact match with one of the suspects on the A+ suspect list. The individual in question had been caught by the police 3 times before and had even taken a polygraph test. Surprisingly, they had passed the test and escaped police scrutiny. This person turned out to be none other than the truck painter, Gary Ridgway, a fact that left the police baffled. Despite being caught multiple times, Gary managed to outsmart the police about his involvement in the killings. The fact that he was able to cheat a polygraph test shows his cunning nature. However, this time the police were determined to keep him in custody. Much to their surprise, Gary appeared to be a normal, well-behaved individual during his time in custody. No one could have guessed that he was actually a psychopathic killer. His reactions and speech were perfect, just like any normal person. It was hard to believe that this man was capable of such heinous crimes. As the police dug deeper into Gary's past, they discovered that he was born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City. Like many other notorious killers, Gary had a troubled childhood. His parents were constantly fighting, and his mother was described as being very modern for her time. Growing up in such an environment, Gary's adolescence was marked by his growing sexual feelings towards his own mother. Despite trying to control these urges, he still remained fixated on sex, even as a teenager. Eventually, he began visiting prostitutes regularly, unable to satiate his sexual desires. His marriage life, like his personal life, was far from successful. In 1971, he tied the knot with his girlfriend, Claudia Craig Powers, but before long, his life took a different turn when he joined the US Army as he was sent off to fight in Vietnam. His wife Claudia engaged in an illicit affair with his friend. This betrayal shattered him, and as a result, he filed for divorce in 1972. After the turbulent experience with Claudia, he married another woman named Marcia Lorraine Brown in 1973. Despite welcoming a son named Matthew in 1975, Gary's obsession with sex did not dissipate. He frequented prostitutes and even coerced Marcia into having sex with him in public. This toxic behavior eventually led to their divorce in 1981. The year 1982 marked the beginning of Gary's reign of terror as a serial killer. However, in 1985, he met his third wife, Judith Mawson, who would change his life. After 3 years of dating, they got married in 1988. Surprisingly, his murders came to a halt after their marriage. Judith described her husband as a sweet and caring person, completely unaware of his dark side. But their happiness was short-lived as the police took Gary into custody in 2001. After interrogating him, he finally confessed to his heinous crimes and revealed the location of the other bodies. Before giving any further information, Gary struck a deal with the police: life imprisonment in exchange for the death penalty. The police accepted his terms, and only then did he reveal the grisly details of his murders, shocking even the most seasoned officers. The perpetrator did not meticulously plan the abduction of the girls. Rather, he slyly exploited vulnerabilities and loopholes to carry out his heinous deeds. He easily kidnapped and murdered the girls, having carefully selected his victims. His targets were often vulnerable individuals, typically between 16 to 18 years old. He would often lure them with false promises of safety, masquerading as a harmless family man. Despite a string of serial killings in the area, the girls still fell for his deceit. He would bring them back to his house and those who refused would be taken to a remote location in his pickup truck. In both scenarios, he had a shed at the ready, where he would coerce them into sexual acts. Once they were spent, he would turn on them, strangling them to death before they could even mount a defense. His victims were no match for him. Being young and unsuspecting, he had complete control over them. After their lifeless bodies lay before him, he would pour battery acid on them, pluck their nails and hair, and burn them. He would revel in these acts, deriving twisted pleasure from them. He then would not dispose of the bodies immediately, instead burying them in a remote area, only to revisit them later for his own perverse gratification. As for his twisted justifications for his actions, he claimed not to have a penchant for necrophilia, but found it significantly easier to have sex with the corpses of his victims. They could not resist or demand a payment, making them the perfect playthings for his grotesque desires. During police investigations, Gary Ridgway confessed to having sexual intercourse with dead bodies, which would often be heavily decomposed and infested with worms. He admitted feeling depressed upon seeing the state of the bodies. After disposing of the corpses in the nearby Green River or surrounding areas, he would deliberately leave behind cigarette butts, chewing gum, and written notes from third parties in order to confuse the authorities and contaminate the crime scene. Despite only 49 murders being proven in court, Ridgway claimed to have lost count and estimated the number to be around 70 or 80, showing no remorse. For each proven murder, Ridgway was sentenced to 10 years in prison, resulting in a total of 490 years life sentence. In addition, he received an extra year for each murder for hiding evidence from the police, adding up to an additional 49 years without parole. As this video is being watched, Ridgway is spending the rest of his life in a Washington jail. During the police investigation, Ridgway stated that he believed his victims deserved to die as they were just prostitutes and objects to him. He also claimed to have no emotional attachment to the murders. As a result, the court gave an additional punishment, allowing the victims' family members to publicly express their thoughts about Ridgway. Many of the family members were heartbroken and scolded him, but he showed no remorse. However, Linda's father, one of the victims, forgave Ridgway, citing God's teaching to forgive everyone. He hoped that Ridgway would change into a better person in the future. The moment he heard this, Ridgway, who had committed countless heinous murders, realized his mistake and broke down into tears in the courtroom. In 2020, it was revealed by authorities that 14-year-old Wendy Stevens was the youngest known victim of Ridgway. Wendy had run away from her home in August of 1983, and her remains were found in a swamp behind a baseball field the following year. In December 2023, the King County Sheriff's Office in Washington announced the identification of another victim through DNA technology, Lori Ann Respotnik. Lori had left home at the age of 15 in 1982 and was never seen again. Her remains were discovered in 1985 and was referred to as Bones 17 during the investigation. In 2002, Ridgway confessed to placing two of his victims in the same area where Lori's remains were found. The haunting story of the Green River serial killer draws to a close, leaving us to confront the terrifying truth of human depravity. The convoluted case of Gary Ridgway serves as a stark reminder of the terrors that can hide behind the facade of normalcy. It also illuminates the tireless dedication of law enforcement and forensic specialists who tirelessly pursue justice for the victims and solace for their loved ones. Though Ridgway resides in prison, the wounds he inflicted upon the community persist. A reminder to remain vigilant and empathetic towards those who have endured the unthinkable at the hands of such monstrous behavior. Remember, behind every statistic lies a human soul, a life extinguished too soon. As we sign off, may we remain vigilant, honoring the memory of those lost to the Green River Killer. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and may justice prevail.